Good evening, everybody. Good evening, and I hope that you're able to see me and hear me okay. Thank you ever so much for joining us for this evening's webinar for years 5 and 6. What I'm really keen to do is talk about how we're going to be making some changes from January. First of all, a particular welcome if there are any year 5, 6 children watching this evening. Really nice to see you. I'm not sure if it's a treat or something rather different to be seeing me without my face mask on, but it is, yeah, it's great, I have to say, seeing you in school every day. It's an absolute joy. So thank you 5s and 6s if you happen to be watching. So this evening what I'm really keen to do is to talk through, to pick up really from the conversation that we had last time. And clearly when we spoke about 4 weeks ago now, coming back after half term, there's been one big change, and that huge change has been the imminent return of years 7, 8 and 9 in January. And it's a great piece of news. We're going to be delighted to see them back in school. I spent quite a lot of time talking to pupils in years 7 and 8, of course, teachers in 7 and 8, and it's going to be great for our school to be back together, particularly the prep school. That's really significant for us. But it does mean that what we thought we were going to be doing for the later stages of this term, well, that means we've had to rethink. And there's been some quite significant rethinking, but it's also, I think, with a sense of certainty, it's given us the opportunity to do some really constructive rethinking as well. So this evening, I'll have a short presentation just to illustrate some of the points that I'm hoping to make. I'll then be joined by Siobhan. Siobhan has done a huge amount of work along with Leo, along with Krista. You know, I'm very, very lucky to have 3 such superb colleagues to help get so much of this work done. But Siobhan and I will be able to take some questions as we go. So one of the differences to the last time we had one of these conversations is that the question stream is live. Now, we're not going to be able to answer everything. Some of the questions just aren't ready to be answered yet, as you will see as the presentation unfolds. Other questions, as they come through, we will do our very best to bring out the main themes. But what we're going to do, I think this is important to establish early on, is we will combine all of the main themes into a frequently asked questions, an FAQs document, which we will send out as well, which will send out probably after the year 7, 8 presentation has happened as well. Okay, so if I just move on now to the short presentation, and it will be short, I'll take myself off there. This idea of it being the next 2 terms is, let me just we're going to be able to be doing. And let me just largely familiar. And what's largely familiar about this is the fact that this is we're in the 3rd phase of our return to school. We talked about the education element. Clearly, we've taken a lot of feedback and a lot of discussion about the importance of well-being, academic rigor, intellectual rigor, well-being. We need to safeguard both of those. Securing one without the other is irrelevant. We have to be getting both right. And the 4th bullet at the bottom, that I suppose has been the game changer. It is all year groups being able to return to school from January 2021. So this is a useful image in some respects, because if we think back to how we organised ourselves for the beginning of this term, for September, it absolutely was a case of all hands on deck. We were coming into an environment that was unfamiliar. The school literally felt unfamiliar. Stickers, tape, hand sanitizing, exam desks in every classroom. And we did exactly what needed to happen. And we threw resource at it. We threw people resource, human resource. It was phenomenal what was done. From Mr. Wilson and the rest of the SLT going around car parks, getting stickers down, from everybody, a school photographer working as a bubble supervisor, everyone who was able to contribute, put their shoulder to the wheel and made a huge, huge difference, because we had to make sure that those first 4 weeks, that was our time frame, those first 4 weeks worked. And we had to get it right. We knew that the penalties for getting it wrong were the jeopardy of the school being able to open and remain open. So we were absolutely determined to get it right. But thinking about this all hands on deck picture, well, yeah, there's not a crisis, but a sustained period of dealing with a very, very particular set of pressures and challenges. And we did what we had to do. But as you can imagine, continuing to do this, well, there comes a point where it's just not sustainable. At some point, there's going to be a level of tiredness that's going to kick in. At some point, there are going to need to be repairs. At some point, we're going to actually have to check the course that we're navigating to make sure we're still heading in the right direction and that we haven't just been buffeted around. So this, I think, is a useful metaphor and a useful image for us to take forward. I think it's a useful image for us to take forward as we go into a phrase that Will Floyd, head of year 8, coined. And he absolutely got it right. He said, Adam, when we come back in January, it's not just the new year, it is the new year. And it is the start of the new year. In many ways, with us coming back for 2021, with us all in school, it is going to feel like the start of the new school year. So what are the requirements? Well, the requirements remain the same. These have not changed, but it's worth just reiterating them. There is a maximum of 15. The bubble has to be secure. And I'll talk a little bit more about the importance of getting that right in a moment. The distance between the bubbles, whether you see it in classrooms or you see it out on the field, that has to be maintained. And the distance within bubbles has to be maintained as far as possible as well. There are some things that we just are not able to do in school at the moment. And some of those things are things that are vital to our children's well-being, to their physical development, to their emotional development, to their musical development, their spiritual development. Singing, which is the lifeblood of a school, it's the soundtrack to a great school. PE, sport, things that I love, things that I know we as a school really value highly. You know, our CCA program, which is a mainstay of us as a school, has just had to be wrapped up for the time being. And the final element, the close and effective supervision. Those are the things that we have to be able to deliver. So what are we trying to do? Well, interestingly, in looking at this list of 6 bullets, the first 2, so a school that's clean, it's safe, it's secure, minimizing disruption caused by any positive cases, looking after children carefully, full-time, face-to-face and remote education, building intellectual ambition and achievement, excellent care and support, happy children. You know, 4 out of those 6 are things that we'd be doing at any point in school if we're doing a decent job. So the school that's clean, safe and secure, intellectual ambition, care and support and happy children, absolutely. The 2 things that are within that though, the things that are probably the outliers in normal circumstances, the first one, minimizing the disruption caused by positive cases. So there have been positive cases. And it's been really interesting to see not just how we've reacted to them immediately as a school organisation, but how you as parents have reacted as well. And as I was in the car park on the crossing yesterday, there was a parent in 5EG. So it was their first day back yesterday, having been out for their fortnight. And the parent, as he walked past me, good morning, how are you? He said something which really, really struck me. He said, hey, thank you for keeping us safe. And that surprised me, but it also really heartened me because he saw that those 2 weeks those children had been out of school, even though they were all perfectly healthy, everything was fine. In those 2 weeks, he understood, yep, there was a frustration. Yes, it will have meant changes to family plans. Yes, the remote learning won't be quite the same as the face-to-face. Yes, it probably had a big impact on some of that family social arrangements. But the view of it was, thank you. You're actually doing it right here. You're trying to get it right, not just for this family, but for all families and for everybody in the school. And that meant a huge amount. So I'm grateful to that, but it's also, I think, just worth highlighting. The other thing I think that's really important to highlight here, it's in the 3rd bullet, and it's providing full-time face-to-face. I was talking to a colleague at another school today. She was talking about her AM class and her PM class. That's a year 5 class, as it happened. I know that we are absolutely determined, particularly in the prep school, to make sure we can be full-time face-to-face. That's an aim. If it was simply to get everybody in and full-time didn't matter so much, if it was part-time, well, that would be a completely different set of parameters that we're working to. But we're aiming for full-time because we think full-time is what our children need. We think that's what is right for your children's well-being and their development. So I think when we look at what the aims are for this period, it is just those two: minimizing the disruption, so that's about bubble security, and making sure we've got that full-time offer. How's it going to look? So for 5 and 6, a lot will stay the same, but there will be some change. There will be some change because there has to be some staff movement. There's a lot of talk about bubbles, and a macro bubble is, in essence, the large chunk of the school that the prep school sits within. So our macro bubble is year 3 to year 8. Our teachers can travel within the macro bubble as long as they respect the 2 meter distances, as long as they make sure they've got all those things like face masks, hand sanitizing, and everything else. But our macro bubble of year 3 to 8 is our prep school. And for me, I'm absolutely delighted that we have that identity back again. But what it means is there are some staff who have been parachuted in to our macro bubble, and there are also some staff inevitably who have been moved to the senior school macro bubble. And I completely understand why. There are GCSEs taking place. There are A-levels taking place. There's the extended project qualification, the EPQ. And one of the benefits of our Cranley education is that staff will have so many different influences and involvement areas right across the school. And usually that's a huge benefit. Here, it's proved to be a slightly more complex challenge for us to deal with, because we have to have that clear line between prep and senior with the bubbles. But we know who we're working with, and we're going to be building the teams. We are building those teams with those staff whom we have available for us. There's also some family movement as well. That's inevitable. In these strange times, it's only normal, it's only natural to say that families will be, for whatever reason, spending a prolonged period away from the UAE. I completely understand that is the case. And of course, if those people are remote learning, it makes the face-to-face friendship, well, it becomes impossible. So as we're having to reorganize, we are looking at the reorganization of tutor groups. We're looking at how we allocate our face-to-face teams across the entire, I'll say the entire school. Well, it is the entire school, because we have to deploy staff to each of the 3 macro bubbles. It's pre-prep, prep, and senior, and they cannot move between. But as we look at the staff we have available, how we deploy people, we're looking really carefully at how we can staff efficiently and effectively to make sure we can continue with that full-time offer. Because in short, creating more teachers isn't a simple fix. You might think it was easy to recruit a teacher. In theory it is, but there's the lead time, because if the chances are if the teacher's good, they're probably already working. The teacher then has to have an induction to go through the simple systems of Cranley. They then have to have the necessary level of training, security checks, and then there's the issue of a brand new teacher being dropped into the school in these circumstances. How fair would it be on that teacher's pupils, the people who are going to be with that child, with the children with that teacher, in effect for the rest of this year? So we've got to think really carefully about doing the best we can for our children with our staff, because, and I think I can say this because I'm still new. We have a quality staff. We have a really good quality staff, and one of the things that struck me throughout this is how determined and keen and enthusiastic my colleagues are to do the very, very best for your children. So there are some huge positives there. So we've got to look at how we get our groupings organised. We're a school that is based on grouping for six cohorts of 6 groups, 6 classes running through, and that's been at the forefront of our mind. So as we look, we're thinking about, when we reorganise tutor groups, we're thinking about friendship groups. We've conducted a new friendship survey. Leo, Krista have gone back quite literally as far as year 3 to look at any particular complexities, any issues that may be hidden to us. We're looking at broad attainment levels, because if we want to enable our children to be developing better and further intellectually, we need to make sure that we're able to give them the best academic diet possible. And that means making sure that we are narrowing the range, because where you have a huge range of current levels of attainment within a group, it then becomes much harder, particularly in COVID circumstances, where you can't have children moving around the rooms to different tables. You can't provide one-to-one support as easily as a teacher, because you simply can't walk among the desks. It becomes much, much harder to deliver really effective developmental lessons to the full range of ability. So we are looking at how we can group where we are broadly narrowing attainment levels. We, of course, need to look at the teachers and tutors that we have available. And there's a new timetable. The new timetable is, in many respects, it's the old timetable. It's the timetable that we'd hoped we were going to be working to way back when we were still wildly optimistic about opening, and the huge amount of work was done on the timetable by Matt McNaught and Damien Ward. So the timetable is going to shift as well to increase the level of teaching in a number of subjects too. There's also another important element in the timetable. If I go back to the all hands on deck image, you cannot have a crew who continually are out on deck fighting the elements, battening down the hatches. At some point, the crew themselves need to have some refreshment. They need to have some nourishment. They need to have some rest. And what we are really determined to do, to make sure we are able to review the quality of what we're doing, to make sure we can continue with the professional development of our colleagues as well. What we're going to be doing is using some time towards the end of the week. So Thursday afternoon, at the moment, as I say, we cannot deliver PE, there's an awful lot we cannot do with music, we cannot deliver games, there are lots of sports we can't deliver. So we are really, really encouraging our children, our families, you, on Thursday afternoons, if there's an earlier finish, for you to be able to encourage your child to take part in something that's going to be some form of outside activity. We've got lots of ideas. I'm not going to go into the detail on what those are now, but some outside activity off screen, in the fresh air, particularly this time of year, because it's worth reminding you and reminding ourselves as teachers, the children are going to be sitting in their spaces, in the same seats, at the same desk, in the same classroom for, well, by the time we get to Thursday lunchtime, it'll be 23, 24 hours. And to be able to have some time away, I think, particularly if we can have some really good structured activities taking place that give them an added element that we are not able to deliver at the moment, I think that would be really powerful. Use of flexible spaces. We've had conversations in the past about the use of the library, the use of the dining room, and there's been discussion about that, really good discussion. And I hope you've seen that as we tried things, we've tested them to see if they work. We don't assume that it is going to work, but nor do we assume it isn't. And I think that solution-focused mindset is really important. The scrutiny, review and further scrutiny, I've already talked about Leo, Krista, Siobhan, just looking, checking, looking. How does this look? What about that? The number of times I've sat in my room and I've heard someone come through with another list, say, what do you think about this one? Do you think this works a little bit better because? And the conversations, each of those conversations is around children. And that's really important. So how will the groups actually work? Well, if we look at this, as I say, we're used to teaching 6 classes, 6 groups in a year group. This isn't a spot the difference round. We've got 4 groups that are of a smaller size and 2 groups of a larger size. Now, we can only have 15 children per bubble. So what we're actually going to be doing is taking the 2 larger groups, E and F, and we're going to be splitting those. So these groups will be working together with the same teacher, not E and F, but E will be working with a teacher, F will be working with a teacher, with teaching assistant support. There won't be remote learners dialing in, it will just be face-to-face teachers. So that takes away a level of technical complexity or potential complexity. And by using broad grouping around ability, we are we are confident that we are going to be able to deliver three things. One, be able to deliver really good quality teaching. The second thing is teaching that is more focused around ability and attainment. And the final and most important thing is it'll mean that we have enough space and we have enough resource to be able to teach 5 and 6, continue to teach them full time, as we're aiming to do full time with 7 and 8 when they come back in January. Space is at a premium. We're really fortunate. We are a spacious school, but straight away when you move from 6 groups to 8 groups, if you move from 6 rooms to 8 rooms, you can see that's a significant increase in the amount of space that's required. So I know that you're going to want to know the details, and the most important detail for me as a parent would be, well, who's my child's tutor going to be, and who are my child's friends going to be in that group? Sunday the 6th of December is the time we're going to be passing this information on. One of the reasons is we're still working at it, because we're still working on the detail of timetabling to make sure we know exactly which tutor could be best placed with which group. We are doing that thoughtfully. We'll do it with an assembly to start the week, so an explanation to your children about how the day is going to play out and how this is going to be. There'll be a dedicated tutorial at the end of the day where each child will be able to virtually meet their tutor, their new tutor. Of course, they can't go to different rooms because of COVID, and also meet the other children in the tutor group. And later that day, there will also be direct contact to each of our families from the child's tutor with a welcome and an introduction. So I know that's the information that you're going to want, well, ideally yesterday, but please, we will get that information to you as soon as we know that it's going to be there and available. Just to finish with, I said it many times before and I'll say it many times again, this is about partnership. We know that this is going to take some time to digest. We know your question will be, well, what if my child isn't happy? My answer to that would be the same. I'll be honest, it is like the usual start to the year. It's the start to the year whereby when we begin a normal school year at the start of September, it's only natural that there are some anxiety, some nerves. I'm not sure my child's right for that tutor. I'm not sure about the friendship group. And what we would say is, well, look, let's give it till half term. Let's give it a couple of weeks. We're not going to ignore it. We're going to monitor it. But we'll happily solve a problem if there turns out to be a problem. And one of the things that I've been really grateful to you for throughout this process is you've trusted us. You've trusted us to do the right thing. You trusted us way back when you decided that your children should be in our school. And I ask you, please, to keep your trust in us, because I can assure you, I can absolutely assure you that we want to do the very best for your children. And I can honestly see that there will be some huge benefits from this. There is some change, and I'm not going to shy away from that. There will be some difference. I'm not going to shy away from that. But I would honestly say that I can see benefits coming as well. And where there aren't, that's my job. That's where I need to help us get this sorted out, because my simple function is to do the very best that I can and that we can for your children. So while I just let that sink in for a moment, I'm going to bring Siobhan on screen. Siobhan will join me now. Good evening, Ms. B. How are you?
Good, thank you. Good evening, Mr. Gibson.
Thank you. Yeah, great, thank you. And I'm just going to have a look to see questions that are coming through at the moment. And I'm looking to see what's coming through so far. And at the moment...
Yeah, no questions at the moment, Mr. Gibson, which maybe tests how great your presentation was.
Well, I think something, I certainly got a question. Siobhan, what have I missed? Which I think is a really important question.
I think you've covered the main things definitely. Just to reiterate, the work that has been done behind the scenes. Change is very difficult. We completely understand that, but every single person down to bubble supervisors, tutors, Leo and Krista's head of years have been involved in the groupings and the allocations, and we really genuinely have properly considered every single individual child and where they would be best suited. And I think there's lots of positives with the timetable. It allows us to bring in little things just like extra native Arabic. I'm really positive about January. I think in terms of breaks, we've been really fortunate, and we are really fortunate with the space that we have outside. The year 3 to 8 will all run on breaks, and we'll continue to make the use of this field. And year 3 use the playground area, and so do year 4. So they will still have the opportunity to get some outside fresh air and make the most of that spring weather, when I can just about tolerate the heat coming from Scotland.
Thank you, Siobhan. Very good question. Can I explain why there's no PE or singing taking place? The simple answer to that is because there are very clear regulations that state we cannot do that. The ADEP regulations state explicitly that there is to be no PE, no sport taking place. Singing is not allowed, I'm afraid. I note that it is happening at another school, apparently. From my point of view, as a member of the leadership team here, we are inspected more often than weekly, actually, with physical inspections. Really good, rigorous, thorough inspections. The regulations are checked, measurements are taken, huge scrutiny, and quite simply, they're the rules that we have been told we have got to follow. If another school in Abu Dhabi might be choosing not to do that, that isn't something I'm afraid I can comment on. I can only talk about what we are able to do here. There's a good question about drop-off and pick-up timings. And also, so in other words, this directive from ADEC or a decision made? No, it is a directive from ADEC, not a decision made by Cranley. I can assure you, if you've seen the trailer for Les Miserables, you might get a sense of the passion for music, and we'd love for the school to be re-inflated with our music and for our sport to be taking place. It's at the moment, it is just not something I'm afraid that we are able to do. So looking at, and I will put my glasses on at this point, any change in drop-off or pick-up times, the changes will be marginal, quite literally in terms of a few minutes here or there. One of the biggest change we had, of course, was with after half term, when 7, 8, sorry, not 7, 8, 9, when 10, 11, 12 and 13 came back, we used the opportunity to narrow the pick-up and drop-off times, or the pick-up times particularly, for the prep school, and that's worked really well. But it's going to be very, very similar in terms of timing and feel to the way it's working at the moment. How does the reorganisation match with the results of the parent survey from Cranley, which favoured to keep the tutor groups? The answer to that is we absolutely survey parents because it's really important we know what our parents think, but it's also really important that as the school, we are in the best position to try to make decisions, particularly based on children's feedback. The friendship survey for our children was really powerful. And quite simply, if there is a teacher who is no longer within the bubble anymore, it is impossible for that child to continue with that tutor. So there are some decisions that we have to adapt to. There are other decisions where we have to find alternative solutions, and quite simply, we are aiming to do that with the child's best interests at heart. So that's been the basis for that. Yeah, absolutely, we draw opinion and we are keen to hear different views, but we do ultimately need to make decisions based on the facilities we have available and where it is considered from my colleagues the best needs, the best outcomes can be for the needs of our children. looking through, will Year 7 still finish early on Thursday afternoon? This is what I alluded to in terms of a slightly earlier finish. I know that 7s and 8s have been doing a lot of, they've been enjoying the earlier finishes, as it were, when learning remotely on Thursday afternoon. So yes, they will. I also know that a number of families in Year 5 and 6 and 3 and 4 pick their children up earlier because they've got activities that they take the children to in the afternoons as well. So rather than running a halfway house, we felt actually it's the right thing to do to be encouraging more children to be making the most of those outside outdoor activities, less time at the same desk, less time on the screen. So regarding the new bubbles, E and F and the grouping, Siobhan, would you be happy to talk a little bit about where we have large bubbles that are, as it were, sort of split down the middle?
Yeah, definitely. So in terms of the bubbles, our bubbles have to remain at 15. Groups E and F will be 2 bubbles, and we'll be using the setup like the library, which I believe the photo has been shared with you before. It's not something that we are trialling new in January. It's actually something that we have trialled consistently throughout this term with Year 3 groups, Year 4 groups. And I know Miss Raithmail, if you're watching, absolutely loves being able to take her 2 groups of Year 5 in there and teach them at the same time. So there will be up to 30 children in that room at that time, but they will very much be 2 separate bubbles. They have separate entrances, and there is a split screen down the middle to maintain that safety, which is absolutely paramount.
Very good question coming through about the opportunity to meet the tutor. So what will happen this term is that your child will have time with the tutor in that virtual meet and with the tutor group, which I think is really important. You will also get a direct email from the tutor, which will give them the opportunity to introduce themselves to you and for you to be able to put a face to a name, which is really important in case that you're not already able to do that. And early next term, there is going to be the Meet the Tutor opportunity. As I say, this coming back in January, yeah, it's the new year with 2021, but it's also, as I said, it's the new school year in that this time we know we're starting as we mean to go on, which I think is quite positive, quite liberating. Questions about free periods. Will they have as many free periods with 7s and 8s when they're in school? I'm aware that we're swerving slightly away from the 5-6 focus, and we have got the 7 and 8 evening coming up. The answer to that is no. They will be there will not be the same element of sort of free time that's going to be there. Another question just come through about will children be able to go outside? Yes. Then the ability to access outside space will be the same as it is now. We are fortunate, we've got a fantastic field. If you've walked past the field at any point when you've dropped off, you'll have seen it's been gridded. Not simply with crisscross, but squares with the necessary space in between each square. The children are great at staying within their own bubble squares, but the children will have just as much time outside. They absolutely will. We need to get logistics right, but we're really fortunate. We've got a great timetabling team, and with Mr. McConnell Wood, his military logistics absolutely spot on. So I can assure you we're going to be precise and on the money there. A quick question has come through again. I will take this. We swerved a little bit into 7-8. Let's swerve also into Year 3-4. Will there be any changes in Year 3 tutor groups as well? At the moment, and I've got to be careful, preface everything. At the moment, no. I think it is right that we're looking at how we can streamline things and how we can do things better. So one of the questions I would ask myself is if we've got 7 classrooms and they've each got 1 or 2 remote learners in, for example, is there a way that on occasion we can do things better with those remote learners, whether that's for a maths lesson or a science investigation or something like that. So we're still sharpening the saw. But no, we're not expecting there to be changes in Year 3 tutor groups at this point. Will prep and senior school be completely separated when 7, 8 and 9 go back? again, good question. I am keen to keep it close to the 5/6s, but yes, they will be separate. One of the jobs that a number of us have got over the winter break is that because the 7s and 8s are going to be based on the ground floor of the senior school. I've already seen how those areas will work separately, and they can be completely sealed off, both in terms of access points for other year groups as well. So even though we're going to be spread physically as a macro bubble, we will be spread physically, but we will still be within a contained series of spaces, which I think is important. Outdoor classrooms, if I said, yeah, I thought that might get a smile from Siobhan. Outdoor classrooms are something that we've discussed and we've explored broadly. In terms of the detail, we still would need to make sure all of the requirements would be in place about making sure that we've got the necessary level of cleaning and everything else that's involved. It is something that we have thought about, but it isn't something that we're necessarily convinced that would work. It's not so much, interestingly, it's not so much equipping outdoor classrooms with tables and chairs. That's easy. The low-tech stuff we just carry out. But the high-tech stuff, making sure we've got really good power running out there, making sure that, of course, it's wired power. We don't want generators because that will just create a huge racket. But making sure that the technology that we'd need to put in, there couldn't be second-grade classrooms out there. But one of the things I commented on in my briefing with prep staff this morning is how much I'm enjoying seeing children outside during lessons with their iPads. We discovered we have a Wi-Fi feed right across the school field. So there are lots of things that we can do, and we are working outside wherever possible. And that, again, is something that ADEC have encouraged us to look at doing, because we know there are lots of really good COVID reasons why we should be doing that. But also there are lots of wellbeing reasons as well. So yeah, it's great to see so many teachers taking the initiative and taking their lessons outside, because it's the perfect time of year to do that. I'm just looking to see okay, I think, Yvonne, can you see anything?
Yeah, there was just one question about the bubbles being rotated. So if you were in the E or the F bubble, no, I would say we have no plans to rotate them. Purely, as soon as we get the children settled in those new routines, we've worked incredibly hard to try and have something that's sustainable across the next 2 terms, and we'd like to keep that tutor and the teachers with them right through as much as possible. That's not to say things won't change. Obviously, we're in ever-changing times, but we don't have plans to rotate them, and that would be with the children's best interests at heart to make sure it is consistent.
Thank you, Siobhan. I am going to take a couple of Year 7 questions. Just the first of these is around COVID testing. Because the Year 7 children are in the prep school, will they still be required to have COVID testing? The regulation is children under 12 are not required to have COVID tests, and I think the flip side of that interpretation is that Year 7 and above will be required to have COVID tests. That is the expectation. Now, the timing of that, we're waiting for further information on that, and as soon as we are informed, we will, of course, let you know. And there was a further Year 7 question. How are we going to be grouping in Year 7? That is definitely one for a conversation for the Sunday evening with the Year 7 discussion and Year 8 discussion. I don't think it would be right for me to start heading into that territory now, when I've made it public to the other parents that we'll be discussing that when we get into Sunday next week. I know that the $64,000 question is absolutely, who's my child's tutor and who's going to be my child's tutor group? And when we have that and we are confident that that information is as good as it could be, and I am confident that the work that Siobhan is doing, that Leo's doing, that Krista's doing, it's it is as thorough as it's as thorough as I would want it to be for my child, and that ultimately is how I look at so many different aspects of school life. Would it be good enough for me to feel okay about that as my child? And yes, that's the case. So I hope that this has proved to be helpful. As I say, we will put an FAQ document together, which will come out following the Year 7 and 8 presentation. Thank you ever so much for joining us this evening. Really appreciate you giving up the time this evening, and I hope it's proved useful. Thank you to Siobhan for not just this evening, but all the work that you have done. Absolutely superb. And thank you to everybody else right across the school. I've mentioned Leo and Krista on a number of occasions, but the Year 5 and Year 6 tutor team have just gone over and above. It's been absolutely superb. The timetabling team with Matt and Damien, and also our wider support right across the school. This is a team effort that is as much down to you as parents, as any pupils who are still watching. Thank you. But if you are still watching, pupils, I'm really looking forward to seeing you tomorrow. Yeah, should be a great day. Lots going on tomorrow, and I hope you have a good evening. And I look forward. I'm sure there'll be more questions coming my way. But we'll get the FAQs out to you, and I look forward to talking again soon. Thank you. Take care. Good night.